All right, let's check the date. It is Saturday, February 7th, 2026.
Here we are.
We are deep into the midterm cycle. The political temperature in the United States is somewhere between boiling and nuclear. And if you have been paying attention to the American experiment for the last decade, you are probably,
Well,
tired.
tired is, I think, the most diplomatic word for it. Exhausted, fried, just completely burnt out.
Exactly. And usually when we sit down to do a deep dive, we are looking at external things.
Right. Policy, geopolitics.
We look at the latest trade bill, or we dissect the polling numbers for the midterms, or we analyze the geopolitical implications of the latest treaty in Europe. But today, we are doing something totally different. We are turning the microscope around. We aren't looking at the politicians. We are looking at the voters.
Specifically, the minds of the voters, the psychology of it all.
Right. We have a fascinating stack of analysis here. Articles, psychological profiles, political theory papers that all circle around a very specific, and I have to say, a very provocative question regarding the current state of the Trump movement in 2026.
It's a charged question.
It is. And the question is this: are Trump supporters at this specific moment in history unwise?
And I want to stop you right there because I can just hear the listeners' defenses going up.
I know.
When we say unwise, that sounds like an insult. It sounds like we're calling half the country stupid. But the source material we're working with today is extremely precise about that word.
Yes.
We are not talking about unintelligent. We aren't talking about bad people. And we certainly aren't talking about people who disagree with me on tax policy.
That's such a crucial distinction. This isn't about policy. You could vote for a tax cut and be wise. You can vote for a border wall and be rise. This deep dive is about cognitive processing.
It is. It's about how human beings handle information, how we process risk, and maybe most importantly, how we justify our choices when the evidence starts to get messy.
Very messy.
The central thesis of the source material is that supporting Donald Trump specifically in 2026, I mean, after the two terms, the impeachments, the trials, the chaotic governance, the sheer volume of history we've lived through,
Right.
it requires a level of cognitive gymnastics that the source argues might actually disqualify someone from being considered politically wise. It argues that there is a breakdown in the machinery of judgment.
So our mission today is to unpack that machinery. We're going to look at the psychological toolkit that keeps loyalty in place long after logic suggests it should have broken. We're going to talk about the airplane pilot analogy, which I think is just brilliant and also a little terrifying. And we're going to put the concept of wisdom through a stress test.
And to do that right, we have to follow the structure laid out in the research. We need to separate three layers that usually get mashed together on cable news.
Okay, so what are they?
Layer 1, the cognitive hardware. These are the biases and fallacies that everyone has. You, me, the listener. We're all wired with these bugs. It's just part of the human condition.
Okay. So universal human flaws. That's the baseline.
That's the baseline. Layer 2, the events, the actual things that have happened in reality over the last 10 years, the concrete history, things you can look up.
Objective reality, as much as we can agree on it.
Yes. And layer 3, the interpretation. How do people explain those events to themselves? That's where the unwise label really comes into play. It's in that interpretive layer.
It's like we're running a diagnostic on the American political brain.
Yeah.
The source material proposes something it calls the gauntlet test.
I love this concept.
It's great. Basically, if you ran every voter through a rigorous obstacle course of cognitive traps, biases, emotional reasoning, logical fallacies, who makes it to the finish line?
And who falls off?
And who falls off?
Sure.
The argument here is that the Trump movement, by its very nature in 2026, relies on those traps more than any other political demographic in modern history.
It's a bold claim, a really bold claim, but the evidence they lay out is compelling.
So let's open up the toolkit. If we are going to understand how someone maintains loyalty in 2026, we have to look at the mechanisms. And the first one, the source highlights, is the big one. The grandfather of all bad decisions.
The sunk cost fallacy.
The sunk cost fallacy.
Sunk cost is just fascinating because it originated as an economic term, but it really governs our emotional lives.
Right.
In economics, it's simple. You've spent $1 million building a factory, new data comes in, it turns out the factory is useless. A rational actor stops building.
Cuts their losses.
Exactly. An irrational actor says, well, I've already spent $1 million, I have to finish it.
Throwing good money after bad. We've all done it. I've done it with cars, with bad relationships, with TV shows I should have stopped watching 3 seasons ago.
We all do it. Now, translate that to the emotional economy of politics. Think about a supporter who got on the Trump train back in 2016. That is 10 years of advocacy.
A decade.
10 years of wearing the hat, 10 years of arguing with their brother-in-law at Thanksgiving, 10 years of defending every tweet, every scandal.
And think about the social cost of that. You might have lost friends over it. You might have caused tension in your marriage. You might have alienated your kids. That is a massive investment of social capital.
Massive. It's not just a vote anymore. It's a core part of your identity. So imagine it's 2026. New information comes to light, maybe another scandal or a policy failure that hurts that voter specifically, or just the accumulated weight of all the chaos.
Right.
To admit now that the leader is unfit, that isn't just changing a vote for the midterms. That is an admission that the last 10 years of your life, your fights, your identity, it was all a mistake.
That's a psychological bankruptcy. It's too painful to contemplate.
It's too expensive. The ego cannot afford to pay that bill. So the brain protects itself. It doubles down.
And this is key. The source material points out that supporters don't experience this as sunk cost. They don't think, oh, I'm committing a logical fallacy.
No, of course not. They reframe it. They tell themselves they are loyal. They are steadfast. They are holding the line against persecution. The story they tell themselves is one of virtue, not error.
So the more you have lost, the more friends you've alienated, the more credibility you've burned, the harder it is to ever turn back. You're locked in the factory you built.
Precisely. And that lock is reinforced by the next two mechanisms which work in tandem: confirmation bias and motivated reasoning.
I feel like confirmation bias is a term that gets thrown around so much, it's almost lost its edge.
It's become a bit of a buzzword.
We all know what it means. We read the news that agrees with us. We follow the people on social media who confirm what we already think.
And that's the passive version. Confirmation bias is just the filter. You scroll past the article that criticizes your guy and you click on the one that praises him. That's easy. It's almost automatic.
But motivated reasoning, that's something else.
That's active. That is the brain functioning like a high-priced defense attorney. You have a client, your belief, and your job, your only job, is to get that client off the hook, no matter what the evidence says.
Give me a concrete example of how that plays out in 2026.
The source gives a perfect comparison. Let's say a politician, you hate someone from the other party, gets caught in a scandal. Let's say they mishandle classified documents or they were caught on tape saying something awful.
Okay.
Your immediate reaction is logical, swift, and harsh. That's illegal, that's corruption, that's a betrayal of the public trust. Lock them up.
Right. The evidence leads directly to the verdict. A to B. No stops in between.
Now take the politician you love. Same crime. Same evidence. Your brain doesn't go to the verdict. It goes to the explanation.
It goes on a detour.
A massive detour. Well, it was a mistake. The archives are disorganized. It's a selective prosecution. The president has the right to declassify anything with his mind.
You're working backwards from the conclusion he is innocent and finding any possible reason to fit that conclusion.
Exactly. And the source argues that in 2026, this has become the primary mode of political engagement for the base. It's not just hypocrisy. And the source is very clear on this. These people aren't necessarily lying to pollsters. They feel the difference.
Why? What makes it feel different?
Their brain actually processes the reality differently because of in-group bias.
The tribal element.
The tribal element. The Trump movement has been incredibly successful at framing itself not as a political party, but as a persecuted tribe. The forgotten men and women. The silent majority.
So when the leader is attacked, the supporter doesn't hear a critique of a public servant. They hear an attack on themselves, on their values, on their way of life.
100%. I remember the basket of deplorables comment from Hillary Clinton back in 2016. That was the moment that cemented this, wasn't it?
It was a gift to them, in a way.
It was the welding torch that sealed the tribe together. Instead of being shamed, they wore it as a badge of honor. I'm a deplorable. So now, 10 years later in 2026, if you criticize Trump, you are criticizing me. You are calling me stupid. And that creates an impenetrable shield against any negative information.
You can't penetrate that with facts.
Because the facts feel like insults. They feel like personal attacks.
Which brings us to the uncomfortable topic of cognitive dissonance. Because eventually, facts do intrude, right? You can only spin so much before reality punches you in the face.
You would think. But cognitive dissonance is just that. It's stress. It's the mental itch you get when you hold two conflicting beliefs. Like, I am a moral family values person, and I support a man who does immoral things. That creates tension. The mind hates tension. It must resolve it.
And since you can't change the past behavior of the leader,
you have to change the context. You have to find a way to make it okay. You say, He didn't mean it literally. It was a joke. The media is taking it out of context. Or the ultimate trump card, pun intended, the evidence is fake.
The nuclear option.
It is. Once you decide that any evidence contradicting your belief is fabricated by a deep state or a fake news media, you have effectively immunized yourself against reality. You have created a closed informational loop.
There's no getting in.
There's no getting in. You can never be proven wrong because any proof is just part of the conspiracy against you. The source argues that this is the defining characteristic of the unwise voter in 2026, the complete inability to be falsified.
There are a few other tools in this kit that the source mentions. Things like authority bias, whataboutism.
Whataboutism is a huge one. The two-croak fallacy, as it's known in logic. Yeah, but what about Hunter Biden? What about the border in 2022?
It's a deflection.
It's a way to deflect moral judgment. It's saying, my guy might be bad, but your guy's bad too, so we're even.
Wow.
It completely sidesteps the actual issue. But the one I really want to highlight for 2026, because it's so powerful, is the availability heuristic.
That's the one about how we judge frequency, right? Based on what comes to mind easily.
Yes. Our brains are terrible at statistics. We're just not wired for it. We judge the likelihood of an event based on how easily we can recall a vivid example of it.
So if I see a plane crash on the news, I'm more afraid of flying, even though driving to the airport was statistically far more dangerous.
Perfect example. So translate that to politics. Violent crime might be statistically down across the board. But if you see 3 terrifying viral videos of a robbery on your social media feed in 1 week, your brain doesn't consult the FBI crime statistics. Your brain says the country is burning.
And Trump's rhetoric is specifically designed to feed that heuristic. It's all vivid imagery.
It's a masterpiece of availability manipulation. He paints these vivid, terrifying pictures of American carnage, of migrants poisoning the blood of our country, of cities in flames. Those images stick in the brain much, much better than a spreadsheet from the Bureau of Labor Statistics showing modest economic growth.
So the voter believes the carnage is real, even if their own neighborhood is quiet and safe.
Their feeling, which is generated by these vivid images, overrides the reality on the ground.
So we've established the toolkit. We know how the loyalty is maintained, but now we need to pivot to the core argument of the source material. The author isn't just listing biases like a psychology textbook.
No, not at all.
They are making a judgment. They are claiming that the result of all this is a state of being cognitively unwise.
It's a harsh statement, and it relies on a concept from computer science. Garbage in, garbage out.
Right. If you feed bad data into an algorithm, you get a bad result. It doesn't matter how powerful the computer is.
Exactly. You could have a supercomputer, a person with a genius-level IQ, but if the inputs are flawed, if the information they consume is polluted, the output will be flawed.
And the source argues that the information environment surrounding the Trump movement in 2026 is so polluted with conspiracy theories, half-truths, and emotional manipulation
The garbage.
that it is statistically impossible to form a wise opinion based on it. You can't build a sound structure on a rotten foundation.
And to prove this isn't just, a feeling, the source actually compares the volume of chaos to previous presidencies. And I found this really striking.
It is, because we tend to have recency bias, thinking politics is always this crazy.
It's not. It really isn't. Look at Nixon. He had Watergate. It was a massive, singular event that consumed and ultimately destroyed his presidency.
One big thing.
One very big thing. Clinton had Monica Lewinsky and Whitewater. Bush had the Iraq War and Katrina. These were discrete, major events that define their terms.
But with Trump,
It's not an event. It's a state of being. It's a constant churning fire hose of chaos. The source cites an ethics watchdog that counted over 300 to 700 potential conflicts of interest in the first administration alone.
3,700.
Let that number sink in. That is not a scandal per month. That is multiple ethical conflicts every single day for 4 years.
And by 2026, the argument is that we are suffering from scandal fatigue. Our outrage circuits are just fried. We just can't process it anymore.
We can't. So we see incompetence. The source specifically mentions figures like Kristi Noem or J.D. Vance or the officials running healthcare agencies, and we just shrug. It's just another Tuesday. The argument is that the unwisdom lies in the normalization of this chaos.
So the voter has lost the ability to be shocked by incompetence or corruption. The baseline has shifted so dramatically.
The baseline is gone. This leads to the argument about priorities, the hill to die on. The source acknowledges, and I think this is fair, that voters have valid concerns.
Tastes
Maybe
fair.
they want lower taxes. Maybe they want stricter immigration laws. Maybe they are worried about the culture wars. Those are legitimate political desires.
I can't just dismiss those out of hand.
No. But the argument for unwisdom is about prioritization. It's about triage.
Yeah.
The source asks, is it wise to prioritize a tax cut or a border wall if the cost of getting it is the general health of the nation or institutional stability?
It's the analogy of the homeowner. You might really, really want new drapes. You might hate the old drapes with a passion. But if the house is on fire and you are standing there arguing with the interior decorator about the drapes,
Unwise.
you are fundamentally misjudging the threat.
That is the perfect analogy. The source argues that while the drapes taxes, culture war issues are important to the homeowner, a wise homeowner prioritizes putting out the fire. The claim is that Trump supporters in 2026 have lost the ability to distinguish between the drapes and the fire.
And worse, that they are cheering for the arsonist because he promised them better fabric.
Exactly.
This brings us to a distinction that I think is crucial for this whole episode. We keep saying wise, but we aren't saying smart. I know plenty of smart people, doctors, lawyers, engineers who are diehard supporters.
Yeah.
Are we calling them dumb?
No, and the source is very careful about this. Intelligence and wisdom are two different cognitive processes. They are not the same thing.
So what's the difference?
Intelligence is processing speed. It's logic, it's the ability to solve a puzzle, the ability to memorize facts, the ability to construct a complex argument. You can be incredibly intelligent, high IQ, and use all that brain power to justify a terrible idea.
That's the high IQ trap, right?
Exactly. In fact, highly educated people are often the best at motivated reasoning.
Why is that?
Because they have the vocabulary, they have the rhetorical skills to rationalize anything. If a low-info voter sees a contradiction, they might just ignore it or feel confused. A high-info voter will write a 2,000-word essay explaining why the contradiction is actually a brilliant 4D chess move.
So intelligence is knowing how to build a nuclear bomb. Wisdom is knowing maybe we shouldn't drop it.
That's a great way to put it. Or knowing that just because you can argue that the bomb will bring peace doesn't mean you should. Wisdom is metacognition.
Thinking about your thinking.
Yes. It involves intellectual humility, knowing what you don't know, knowing the limits of your own knowledge. It involves cognitive reflection, stopping yourself from just going with your gut instinct and asking, wait, is my first impulse right here?
And it involves integrative complexity.
Which is just a fancy term for the ability to hold two opposing ideas in your head at the same time.
He's good for the economy. He's bad for democracy.
Hmm.
A wise person can hold both of those thoughts and weigh them. An unwise person collapses them into he is good, period, or he is bad, period.
Precisely. The source also touches on the correlation with education. We know the demographics. Trump performs very strongly among non-college educated voters, but the source warns us not to be elitist about this.
A degree doesn't grant wisdom.
Not at all. I've met plenty of PhDs with zero wisdom, and I've met people without a high school diploma who are profoundly wise.
But education does correlate with media literacy, usually.
Yeah.
And in this environment, that seems critical.
That's the key. In an age of garbage inputs, media literacy is a prerequisite for wisdom. If you can't tell the difference between a sourced investigative report from Reuters and a meme from a troll farm in Macedonia, you are starting at a massive disadvantage. You cannot be wise if your map of reality is drawn by liars.
The source also touches on religion here, which is tricky ground.
It is. It's very delicate. The source argues that dogmatic belief can be a barrier to political wisdom if it stops you from questioning. If you believe a leader is chosen by God, the Cyrus the Great argument we hear so often.
Right, that he's an imperfect vessel for God's will.
Then critical thinking goes out the window. You don't audit God's chosen vessel. You just have faith. And that's a different operating system from wisdom.
But surely you can be religious and wise. That seems like an obvious truth.
Of course. The source notes that some of the wisest figures in human history, MLK, Gandhi, Kierkegaard, were deeply religious. The issue isn't belief, it's certainty. It's the dogmatism that prevents reflection.
So it's how you use your faith.
Exactly. MLK used his faith to challenge the status quo and reflect deeply on justice. He didn't use it to blindly follow a demagogue. That's the difference.
Okay, I want to get to the analogy that really anchors this whole deep dive. The airplane pilot analogy. This is the one that forces us to look at the role of expertise in a democracy.
It's a powerful one. The source puts it bluntly. Most people lack the wisdom to pilot a plane. That's just a fact. They didn't go to flight school.
I certainly don't.
Me neither. But if those passengers vote to put a clown in the cockpit just because the ticket is cheaper, that is an unwise decision.
It's a visceral image. You're at 30,000 feet. You don't want the guy who's entertaining. You want the guy who knows how to land.
Right.
But I have to play devil's advocate here. And the source does too.
As it should.
Voting isn't really piloting the plane, is it?
No. That's the flaw in the analogy. Voting is hiring the pilot. And that's a different skill.
Right. It's a judgment call.
When you hire a pilot, you aren't just looking for technical skill, though you certainly want that. You are looking for trust. You are looking for someone who will fly to the destination you want to go.
Right. If the expert pilot, the establishment politician, insists on flying to a destination I hate, let's say a future where my industry is regulated out of existence, or my religious values are mocked, or my town is dying, then maybe I do vote for the guy who promises to fly somewhere else, even if he flies a little erratically.
Even if he does a barrel roll now and then.
Exactly.
And that is the counter-argument. I'd rather risk a crash than fly to a gulag.
This brings us to the absolute heart of the unwise debate, risk assessment.
Two different groups assessing risk in two totally different ways.
Totally. The person calling supporters unwise sees Trump as a systemic risk. They see a risk to the rule of law, to democracy, to the very structure of the cockpit. They think the plane is going to crash and kill everyone. But the supporter looks at the alternative, say the Democrats, and they see that as the crash. They see open borders or economic collapse or cultural erasure as the crash.
Exactly. And this is a fundamental point. If your premises differ, if you believe institutions are corrupt and need to be destroyed versus institutions are vital and need to be protected, then two perfectly rational people can reach opposite conclusions.
However, here comes the big however.
There's always a however.
There is.
However, the source argues that by 2026, the evidence of systemic risk from Trump is so overwhelming, the chaos, the instability, the weaponization of the Justice Department, the erosion of NATO, the questioning of elections, that continuing to equate that with normal political disagreement is a failure of calibration.
It's a failure of scale.
Yes. It's like saying the other pilot might fly to the wrong city, but this pilot is actively setting the controls on fire and trying to open the emergency door. At a certain point, the risks aren't equivalent.
They're not symmetric.
They are not symmetric, and the source argues that the unwisdom lies in the inability to see that asymmetry.
So given all that, is it even theoretically possible to be a wise Trump supporter in 2026? The source tries to steel man this, to build the strongest possible version of that person. I think this is a really important exercise.
It is. It's critical. Because if we just say they're all cultists, we learn nothing. We just shut down conversation.
Right. So what does a wise Trump supporter look like?
Well, first off, they aren't in a cult. They don't deny the controversies. They don't scream fake news at every headline they dislike. They acknowledge that Trump is impulsive, inflammatory, and chaotic. They see the flaws clearly.
So they admit the house is on fire, or at least that it's full of smoke.
They admit the drapes are smoking, at least. But they frame the choice as comparative. They see it as a binary choice, and they say Trump is flawed, deeply flawed, but the alternative is worse.
So it's a lesser of two evils calculation.
A very calculated one. They prioritize outcomes over tone. They might say, I hate the tweets, I hate the chaos, I hate the rallies, but I need the conservative court appointments. I need the trade protectionism. I need the deregulation.
It's a transactional relationship, not an emotional one.
Exactly. It's cold, calculated pragmatism. This person possesses what the source calls calibrated distrust.
I like that phrase.
It's good, isn't it? They are skeptical of the media, but they aren't conspiracy theorists. They don't think the election was stolen by Italian satellites, but they do think the system is rigged against outsiders and working-class people. There's a kernel of truth they're holding on to.
That person sounds coherent. Their logic holds together, even if you disagree with the premise.
It is coherent. It's a rational position, but, and here is where the source really drills down. The argument is that even this wise supporter is failing in one specific critical area, risk calibration.
How so, if they've already weighed the risks?
Because they are betting that the institutional damage Trump causes is reversible. They are betting that the fire won't burn down the whole house. They think we can survive 4 years of chaos to get our tax cuts, and then things will go back to normal.
And the source says that's a bad bet.
The source argues that in 2026, after everything we've seen, that bet is statistically unwise. It fundamentally underestimates how fragile democracy actually is.
It underestimates how hard it is to rebuild trust.
Exactly. It underestimates how hard it is to rebuild trust in elections or the rule of law once it's shattered. You can repeal a tax law in a week. You can't rebuild trust in the Supreme Court or the FBI in a decade. Maybe not in a generation.
So even the smartest, most cynical supporter is making a bad gamble.
That's the argument. They are winning the battle for a specific policy, but they might be losing the war for the republic.
This brings us to the most uncomfortable part of the deep dive, the labeling. The source explicitly claims, "I'm willing to make a claim that Trump supporters are cognitively unwise." Is that fair? Or is that just elitist name-calling that drives people further apart?
It brings us right back to the basket of deplorables problem, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah. The source tackles this head-on with what it calls the asymmetry question. The argument goes like this. Look, not all supporters are unwise. We just described the wise supporter, but the probability is high enough that we can make a pragmatic judgment.
It's like saying smoking is unwise. Not every smoker gets cancer. Some smokers live to be 100. Some smokers are brilliant physicists. But the act of smoking, as a general rule, is an unwise risk to take.
That's the logic perfectly. The source points to the asymmetry in the information ecosystem. They argue that currently in 2026, conspiracy thinking, election denial, and rejection of objective fact are significantly more prevalent on the political right. The chaos of the movement creates an environment where wisdom simply cannot survive for most people.
But the danger of generalization is real. We're talking about tens of millions of people. The heterogeneity is massive. You can't paint them all with one brush.
Huge heterogeneity. You have the single-issue voter who just cares about abortion. You have the low-info voter who just recognizes the name from TV and likes his style. And you have the high-info accelerationist who wants to burn the system down because they think it's beyond saving.
Lumping them all together as unwise is analytically sloppy at best.
And practically it backfires, right? If you tell me I'm unwise, I don't say, oh, thank you for the feedback. Let me reflect on my cognitive biases.
No, you tell me where to go. You double down. You get defensive.
The backfire effect.
Yeah.
It attacks their identity. If you call someone unwise, you aren't inviting them to a debate. You're shutting the door. You are triggering that in-group bias we talked about at the very beginning.
It just reinforces the whole cycle.
It does. However, the source pushes back on this civility argument. It's a pragmatic pushback. They argue, we need to make a stand.
What does that mean? A stand on what?
A stand for reality. At what point does being polite become being complicit? The source argues that there is a point where both sidism becomes a lie. If one side is operating in reality where the 2020 election was stolen, the medical system is trying to kill you, and the president is a messianic figure, and the other side is, well, just arguing about tax rates.
Pretending those are equal opinions is a failure of truth.
It's a failure of nerve.
It reminds me of that quote, "Tolerance ends where harm begins." Which brings us to the final section of our outline. When do we draw the line?
This is John Stuart Mill's harm principle applied to the 21st century. Society tolerates a lot of weird beliefs. You can believe the earth is flat. You can believe in ghosts. You can believe the moon is made of cheese. We might think you're wrong, but we let you vote.
But that's the key. When a belief starts to cause demonstrable harm to others, to the system itself, society has to step in.
It has to, for self-preservation. And the source lays out criteria for this. When does a political belief cross the line from just an opinion to something harmful and unacceptable?
Okay, what are the criteria?
They list 4. 1, is it demonstrably false? Not just, I disagree with your policy, but is it contradicted by hard empirical evidence, like the election was stolen?
Right, falsifiable and falsified.
2, does it lead to harmful action? Is it destabilizing institutions or inciting violence?
January 6th being the prime example.
The prime example. 3, does it scale? It's one thing if one guy in his basement believes it. It's another thing if millions of people are acting on it.
And the 4th one?
Reversibility. And this is the big one. This is the one that really haunts me. Is the damage hard to undo? If we pass a bad tax law, we can repeal it in 4 years. If we erode the public's trust in the very concept of democratic elections, how do you fix that?
I don't think you can. Not quickly.
That takes generations if you ever get it back at all. The source argues that the unwisdom of the Trump movement in 2026 lies in the fact that the damage it is causing is largely irreversible.
That is a chilling thought. We are tampering with the foundation, not just the paint. We are pulling bricks out of the basement and hoping the house stays up.
And the paradox is that Society needs to draw these lines to survive. We can't tolerate intolerance forever. But drawing them too early or too broadly leads to authoritarianism. It's tightrope walk.
And right now, in 2026, the rope is shaking violently.
It really is.
So where does that leave us? We've unpacked the biases, sunk costs, confirmation bias, motivated reasoning. We've looked at the garbage in problem. We've looked at the pilot analogy and the risk of systemic collapse. What is the takeaway from all this?
I think the summary is that wisdom isn't about being smart. It isn't about agreeing with the elites or reading the New York Times. It's not about what you know. It's about how you know it.
And how you handle uncertainty.
And how you handle risk. At its core, wisdom is about risk management. It's about recognizing which mistakes are survivable and which are catastrophic. The source suggests that the core failure of political wisdom in 2026 is the underestimation of systemic risk.
We're playing with fire and convincing ourselves it's just a candle.
Exactly. And the source leaves us with a final, provocative thought. It's a question that serves as the ultimate test of political wisdom, and it applies to everyone. Trump supporters, Democrats, independents, everyone listening right now.
Okay, what's the question?
The question is, what evidence would make me change my mind?
Ooh, that's good. That's really good.
It sounds so simple, but try to answer it honestly. If you are a Trump supporter, what would he have to do specifically for you to say enough? If the answer is nothing, then you aren't wise. You're in a cult of personality. You have failed the falsification test.
And we have to flip it. You have to ask the same question of yourself. If you're a Democrat who thinks Biden or his successor is the only way, what would the other side have to do for you to say, you know what, this policy is actually working?
Exactly. A wise person always has an answer to that question. They know their falsification criteria. They can say, if inflation hits X, or if crime hits Y, or if this specific thing happens, I will change my view.
But an unwise person.
An unwise person does not have an answer. An unwise person has decided the conclusion in advance, and everything else is just noise to be filtered, deflected, or rationalized away.
What evidence would make me change my mind? I think that is a question we should all stick on our bathroom mirrors. It's the intellectual equivalent of checking your blind spot before you change lanes.
It's the only way to stay sane in 2026, and it's the only way we keep the plane from crashing.
Well, there you have it. A deep dive into the psychology of the American voter in 2026. It's not comfortable, it's not polite, but the sources argue it is necessary.
It certainly is.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Stay wise.
Take care, everyone.